Hello, dear friends. We're continuing our show, Secrets of the Eternal Book, and we're talking about the Eternal, about how to read this book, the Bible, the Pentateuch, the Torah, and of course it's all about us, and with us is Dr. Michael Leitman. Hello. And today we'd like to talk about the VaYishlach chapter, literally meaning, and he sent. And it begins with Yaakov, Jacob, being extremely terrified of Esau. Of course. Why? Well, imagine a person before whom there is an excellent, exalted continuity of life, eternal, whole, complete, perfect, harmonious, the revelation of the Creator, the revelation of the upper world altogether. All this if he connects with the Yaakov inside of him. Yes, this is the perspective that Yaakov sees. The other perspective is if he immerses into his ego called Esau, and in it spends the rest of his miserable life controlled by the ego, he completely forgets about everything else and is completely immersed in this useless pursuit after the as if corporeal pleasures that only push a person into further depression. And he feels Esau coming closer, the danger. Yes, a person that actually sees ahead such a perfect perspective on the one hand, and on the other hand, sees how this ego is grabbing hold of him, pulling him down into this dark abyss where he's going to be in constant depression and will all the time have to somehow only try and save himself of it, to be engaged in whatever just to fill your head with something in order not to think about the emptiness or the purposelessness. And this after a person feels, what does it mean to be with Jacob? He has this feeling that everything's, yeah. They're already one opposite the other, these two options. So the revelation of Jacob already exists in a person, and then he's afraid of Esau. And this is what it says about it in the oral Torah. Yaakov sends messengers to Esau, and this is what they tell him. How can you send us to meet Esau? The messengers were surprised, were afraid of even being seen by him, and you want for us to go and negotiate with him. Don't worry, said Yaakov. I will ask the angels that met us at the entrance to the land of Israel to go in front of you and protect you. And this is what it says in the written Torah. He instructed them. This is what you're to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I'm sending this message to my lord that I may find favor in your eyes. When the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, we went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Meaning that even though that Jacob thought to somehow hold on, meaning, on the one hand, he understands that development is possible only through some kind of connection with Esau, because Esau is our entire substance, ego, tremendous energy, everything that you can ascend to the Creator with. So you can't bypass him somehow. No, in no way. You have to gradually take certain concrete portions from him, of his ego, to that extent to which you can invert it into altruistic actions, because it's impossible to work without the ego. So a part of Esau has to all the time turn into Jacob. Yes, Jacob, by absorbing the desires of Esau into himself and adapting them, becomes Israel. So there's no way to bypass this. But in what way is it possible to somehow find a way to interact with him? Because this ego wants to completely swallow everything on the one hand. On the other hand, it's controlled by the Creator, frightening us on purpose, confusing us on purpose, and so on, twisting and turning us in order for us to become even more cunning, wiser, for us to understand his system and trick the ego. What does it mean to trick? That he says, I'll give you donkeys and this and that, meaning, in what way can we throw some kind of compensation to our ego that will calm it down for the meantime, and along with it to gradually control it, like you do with animals when we tame them, like we do with wild animals, wild nature. We somehow, nonetheless, in every action of ours, we have to put in energy. We have to give something, and in return, we receive. It's the same like with anything that we create, any new product. There are things that are completely unnecessary, that we waste our energy on, but in return, we gain something. The coefficient of effective action, you can't escape it, and this determines the benefit that you get out of it. 4%, 10, 20, 90%, doesn't matter how much. But nonetheless, we have to spend a certain amount of energy when we work with material, with the ego. And if it's not with the ego, then you rise to a level like with superconductors, where you freeze the ego, rise above it, and you have a superconductor. Nothing holds you back, and there you have completely different laws. Why not freeze it? Well, I don't exactly remember how everything you just explained works, even though I studied this at school, but still, you said that on the one hand, we have to work with it. Superconductors is a form of matter that doesn't resist the electric current running through it, meaning it doesn't resist the work that you want to do with it. So why isn't it possible to freeze Esau? No, it's impossible. Because you can't work with this. You have to use the ego. You have to use its resistance in order to use it correctly, only in its inverted form. It's like with people. If there's a person with tremendous desires and he's really cruel and coarse and he wants a lot in life, he wants to conquer everything, know everything, everything including everything. Redirect him towards something good and you'll get tremendous benefit out of him. And if he has no ego, that it's small and he flows above it like a superconductor, there's no resistance, then the leap is also small. So anyone who wants to be greater needs a greater ego. Therefore, Jacob, after he was already at Laban's, after he already has wives and children and cattle and everything, in order to continue growing, he needs Esau. Esau is a serious guy. He killed Nimrod, the king of the ego that reigned in the times of Noah and Abraham. Nimrod is the king of Babylon. It's the entire Babylonian tower. He killed him while hunting. It's the future development of the ego, and from Nimrod came Esau. Okay, Yaakov turns to the Creator, and this is what he says. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. This is what he's afraid of. This is the consequence because he has to continue and develop. The mother with the children means his nukva, through which he gives birth to his next degree, and this way develops the human part inside himself. Of course, he only wants to get an additional kind of weight in order to continue developing. And here, before him, there is such a cyclope. And to cut a small piece off him in order to rise a bit and another bit, we can advance toward the goal only in portions because it's the opposite of our own qualities. We're in the quality of reception, egoistic qualities, and the goal is altruistic. And you can advance towards it only gradually. And when such a tremendous mountain of ego appears before a person, he sees what that is. It frightens him so much that he simply can't. He turns to the Creator. It's good to turn to the Creator, but you have to come to that too. At first, it's just fear. He doesn't turn to the Creator. He's just afraid. He doesn't know what to do. And then some time goes by, and discernments, inner scrutinies, analysis, and only then appears this movement toward the Creator, that if I'll turn to Him, that if I'll try, that if I'll acquire such forces, then I can encounter this. So everything begins with fear. Everything, of course. If I'm facing the ego, I personally, and the Creator is looking from the side, arranging this on purpose, like little Moses against the great Pharaoh. And that's always how it is, and the very preliminary feeling is fear. But it's not just physical fear, it's the fear of not being able to realize my designation. I kept reading the oral Torah, and there it says, before meeting Esau, Yaakov hid his daughter Dinah in a chest because he was afraid that he'll like her and will demand her to be his wife. Well, he'd like Dinah for sure because she's closest to him. Dinah comes from the word din, judgment, harsh judgment, and therefore obviously she's closest to him, and she'd suit him for sure, meaning he would have seen only her. All the rest, for him, we don't see good altruistic actions. They don't interest us. That's our nature. We see that which we can benefit from. And Esau, our ego, would have immediately seen Dinah. She'd seem pretty to him for sure, and all the others wouldn't. So this is what it says. But the Creator decided, since you did not want to commit a good deed and give Dinah as a wife to your circumcised brother, I swear to you, she will be taken by someone who's non-circumcised. She has such spiritual greatness that, being next to Esau, it might have corrected him. Well, that's all true. Because, it's not that moment where it could happen yet, meaning these two forces or categories in a person, Esau and Dinah, they're of course one opposite the other, but it's necessary to correct both. Dinah is also uncorrected, even though that she's the daughter of Jacob, but she needs further corrections, and gradually, she will appear in many female forms and will be corrected. And, of course, her destiny and everything is tragic in our corporeal understanding. And then happens the following. Since he's afraid of Esau, he starts dividing his brigade into several parts that even if he will defeat those, others will continue, and so on. And here happens something strange, meaning as a result he remains alone, and this is what happens. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled him till daybreak. When the man saw that he cannot overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched, as he wrestled with the man, and then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans, and you have overcome." Jacob asked, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It's because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." So who did he actually see? Peniel. Panim, meaning face, and El, God. So it turns out that he was fighting God, and this is why he couldn't tell him who and what. So he was fighting the Creator. Practically, yes. Because the Creator, he's the one who supports the ego, sustains its intention, gives it its power. So we have to invest such tremendous efforts and scrutinies and analysis and go through such problems and troubles, because otherwise we will not understand the Creator. The Creator created the opposite form of himself, so that by being opposite to him, we will gradually come to know him from the opposite. It's like the law of double negation, like antimatter, like all these opposites. Our world versus the spiritual, and the same with the Creator, we attain him from the opposite. And Esau, Pharaoh, Bilam, Balak, everything. All these negative as if forms. It's all the Creator that all the time dresses in these different shapes and forms, and this is how we gradually come to know him. So Jacob fights the oppositeness of the Creator, and he wants to win, meaning to make it similar. And on his degree, he overcomes that force, that form. Well, there's more to explain here, and this is why he gets the name Israel. Yes, he starts coming closer to a state where, from a state of katnut, of smallness, he reaches the state of gadlut, adulthood, where he starts acquiring the system of 3 lines, meaning in his hands he has the right line coming from Abraham, the left line coming from Isaac, his father, and he becomes the 3rd line. Powerful, mighty, that governs all of these states called Jacob and Israel. meaning the state of smallness is Jacob and the state of greatness is Israel. And this means that his successors will have the ability to see the greatest ego. His successors will be able to start correctly realizing this ego. They will already advance with the help of these three lines: the two forces that come from above, the negative egoistic force, the positive altruistic force, and every time working with them in such a way that they elevate the ego to its normal degree and the altruism, the right line, even higher. And this way, every time in the correct combination of the right and left lines, so that the altruistic intentions will always work above the ego, using it for bestowal. And that's the way to ascend. So a person who has acquired the middle line, nothing frightens him. He can see his most egoistic states. He sees his most egoistic states, but opposite to them, on the right side, he always has the forces to deal with them. So he's always in contact with the Creator. Yes, even in the worst states. And are these terrible states for him? Open the book of Psalms, written by David. Yeah, not easy, but still there's a feeling that there's light right ahead. There's someone to call out to. There's connection, and these are all the descents of the Kabbalists that we were told about. Terrible descents. But the main thing is that the connection remains. The rope's tearing up. What's left is a thread, and at the very end, you still hold on to it. Even if I can't emit the words like with a Baal Shem Tov, doesn't matter. The connection still exists. So a Kabbalist can't, for example, commit suicide. Of course not. He has to go through the path of correction from beginning to end, and for him it's joy. I can't imagine such a situation. Our connection with the Creator does tear up, but it's only momentarily. In order to rise to the next degree, there has to be a cut between the degrees, because these are completely new 10 sfirot, a completely new structure. But when it's torn up, it's being torn up from above. It's not that man does it, and therefore it's restored. So in the worst possible descent, this understanding remains. Yes, that the next step is coming. A person feels that he is going into a fall, and that he's working in this fall, that it's not up to him. He continues doing his thing. It's like a car. There are ups and downs and hills and valleys, but the car keeps going. You know that you have to reach Jerusalem. Right. And your constant advice for these ups and downs is to increase the speed, the rate. If you can increase your advancement, then, of course, by that, you smoothen the path. By the way, usually we drive slowly on a bumpy road. Otherwise, it can really shake us up. But if we, with the help of our screen, can avoid feeling the ascents and descents, but for us the ascents and descents will be the same, then we practically even them out. We turn them into a flat terrain, meaning we make them much smaller. What I want to say is that to the measure to which a person accepts the descents as ascents, to that degree he can increase his speed. Otherwise, you can't increase the speed. Meaning, your car can suppose take 10 jumps per hour. So, if you smoothen these bumps, then that way you'll be able to advance at a higher speed. You won't feel the little bumps, for example. It's like a glider kind of that simply glides over everything and doesn't feel all the ups and downs and so on. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon, meaning that Jacob cannot completely work with all the desires. The endings of the, so to speak, spiritual structure, they can't be used by him. He's limping. He can't use them because he doesn't have so much strength. only at the end of correction, where he will correct everything besides these endings, lower endings, in their correct right form, the so-called nehi or achap, then their complete correction will occur and not before. So he can't use this lower part of his. He can't. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. And this is what the oral Torah says. At that time, the wives and children of Jacob came closer to bow to Esau. Esau saw all of them besides Rachel. Joseph stood fully up so that Esau will not see her. Joseph thought, I will not allow him to look at the mother, and I don't want for her to see him. She's pregnant, and God forbid, she might be startled and something might happen to her. So it says in the oral Torah. Why does Joseph cover her? First of all, Joseph isn't Jacob. Joseph is the next degree that exists precisely between Jacob and Esau. It's a very serious degree, right? Of course, because it's the lowest, the strongest degree that stands before Esau that can really go against him. And afterwards we see that he goes against Pharaoh and so on. And this is why he covers the mother. The mother is pregnant, impregnated by Benjamin, his younger brother, that later on he'll ask him to remain in Egypt. And of course, you can unfold all of this much further. Amazing script, really. The thing is that Joseph understands what will happen in the future. This quality in a person understands, a person feels that he will have to work with this quality, with Esau, in the future, when Esau will be reborn and will ascend, meaning that he'll acquire a greater egoistic thickness and will become Pharaoh. And that's how it gradually goes. All of these heroes, they're merely 2 lines. There's our ego in its different variations, and altruism. Nimrod, Esau, Pharaoh, it's all the same. Yes. And Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, yes. And Jacob, he's not from that side. He's already in the middle. And Joseph is even more in the middle. He already ties the one line with the other. Yosef, Joseph, from the word lasof, to collect, gather. And so he starts gathering the right and left lines, and it so turns out that he even works with Pharaoh, with the ego correctly, so that it's accumulated in the ego, meaning that actually man is performing spiritual work, but in the meantime, still it's accumulated in the ego, meaning the ego is happy about this spiritual work. It's a very interesting period where the ego is completely fulfilled and the entire world is sold to Egypt as slaves only in order to survive the famine. And only afterwards does Moses start the reverse process. And Jacob, when he goes down to Egypt to find Joseph, he blesses Pharaoh. So when it was the quality of Esau, he was afraid of the ego. But when Joseph is doing this work and connects everything already, Yosef, from the word lasof, to gather, to connect these 2 lines, then Jacob can adhere to that and give a blessing. What's interesting is that it's not Jacob who covers his wife, but Joseph does, because it's the next degree. It already shifts into the next degree, because Jacob is already called Israel, and that's why Joseph appears. Look, as a scriptwriter, I have to tell you that it's simply amazing how everything's intertwined and connected. The script is written in a very foggy way, meaning you see the actions done by the different characters, but you don't understand their meaning. There's so many contradictions in this script. It's written beautifully, really. Dr. Laitman, unfortunately, our time's up, but we'll continue this on our next shows. Thank you very much for being with us. Till next time, we wish you all the best. There's still a lot of work to be done. So see you on our next shows. All the best.